Hello. Welcome to today's discussion on business combinations for financial statement analysis. When we look at acquisitions, mergers, takeovers, sometimes the words are used interchangeably from a business perspective, but they do have different accounting and financial meanings. Now, there are really three motives to have one of these events take place. First is it's strategic. And this is when you can improve and develop the business. Think revenue, okay? That this is going to be able to grow revenue. And it's very much linked to the competitive advantage the firm has. It will result in increased profits, or at least that's the goal. But it's through developing the business. Then there's the financial motives. And that is making best use of financial resources. A lot of times what that means is one company may have a lower cost of capital than another, so they can use that lower cost capital to improve products. You have a lot of redundancy in organizations. You put two companies together that both have a CFO and a finance staff, you probably don't need both. You don't need two HR. You don't need two strategic planning. You don't need two treasurers. So there's a lot that can come together to reduce costs in a motive. This results in better financial performance, same thing, but it's done differently. Okay? The last one is a manager wants to do it. He wants to leave a legacy. He wants to do something big. That may or may not be the best thing. Now, when we have any, and we're going to use the words takeover, merger, combination, acquisition interchangeably for this purposes. So first thing is there's positive impacts. Oftentimes improved revenues and profits. Reduced competition. That's always good. You take out a competitor. Greater capabilities. Okay, you can, and drug companies will do this, and they will buy drugs that have been made by other companies and use the distribution capacity. Better access to markets. Negative effects. Sometimes you have one-off costs in effective integration. It's disruptive going through it. Too much focus on cost synergies, taking out costs, can really hold back the business side from growing. Cultural conflicts. Each organization has its own culture, set of behaviors, set of approaches. And sometimes you put two organizations together without considering culture, that can have a very negative impact. And the best example that I can give you of that is there was the New York Central Railroad and the Pennsylvania Railroad. They were both in trouble and they merged to form Penn Central. And what happened is there was one green team and one red team. So instead of taking the best practices of each one, they picked different actions to be managed by one. They didn't always match up from a process perspective. They didn't take what was best. They tried reducing expenses, but what happened is they had the process so split apart, it didn't work, and they went into bankruptcy shortly thereafter. And the risk of overpayment for the transaction is really big. You make, and you'll see as we estimate and find out how you actually determine the purchase price, what that overpayment may be. So those are the potential positives and negatives. Okay, the first thing we have is an acquisition. One company takes over another. That is an acquisition. One company acquires all of the assets or stock of the company for either cash or stock or a combination thereof. Okay? One company is in control. Okay? So this is an acquisition. It's a takeover. Okay? And one company remains in control. Then there are mergers. Two companies come together to become one. Often that's a new company, new co as it's called, or a holding company to own the two companies. There's new processes and structures. So we're not running them as independent. We're not taking one best practice and using it, but we're creating a new process and structure. There's more equality between the two companies, and there's really not a surviving company. They'd actually come together. So the distinction is acquisition is one person, one company acquires another and is in control. The other is a merger where two organizations can come together and become one. The last one is a joint venture, and that's when two companies work together. It can be on a specific project they come together. It can be working together. Xerox and Fuji have had an alliance joint venture for quite some time. Both firms in a joint venture retain their own independence, and they work together on something, a joint venture, okay, to achieve a common purpose. Sometimes alliances make more sense than acquisitions. Each party can bring strengths, access to new markets and technology, and shared risks. We're not giving up our independence, but we're working jointly to achieve that goal. Next topic. So that's what the basic structure. Friendly or hostile? Okay. Friendly, everybody likes it. Okay? The merger or acquisition is supported by the leadership of both firms. They say, yep, let's do it. Then there is hostile takeover. And in that the target firm's acquisition management resist it. Say, no, we don't want to be acquired by you. The acquiring company, often try to replace the board of directors to get the board of directors to approve the transaction. Sometimes the acquirer goes directly to the target firm stockholders, trying to get 51% to tender their shares. The pitch to the shareholders is that unlock value. Your stock may be trading at $20 a share today. We'll give you $30, and that unlocks the value. Oftentimes, transactions start out hostile, but they end up as friendly when offer prices go up. So the more you're willing to pay, it becomes more acceptable. Okay, because you got to think about this. The board of directors has a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholder to do what's in the best interest of the shareholder. So they have to be very careful on this, that they do what's right for the shareholder. And if there's value being unlocked, they got to act that way. Again, management may like it when the price goes higher because they may have some golden parachutes, a payment on acquisition. They may also have stock options too. So when the price goes up, oftentimes hostile become friendly. Not all the time. Friendly or hostile. Next thing is there is a horizontal merger, and in that you take two direct competitors and put them together. Okay, that's horizontal, two direct competitors. And then there's market extension, competitors in different markets. So we may have a firm that does business on the East Coast, and they merge with a company doing business on the West Coast. Same products, but new market. That'd be a market extension. A horizontal merger and when they're direct competition. So we could look at that as the Sprint and the T-Mobile. They are true competitors. Okay? There's different issues from a regulatory perspective, but that's a horizontal. Now, what are the advantages of a horizontal integration? Economies of scale. Selling more of the same product, sharing resources, different products and synergies. Increased market power. This is probably the biggest reason. And then reduction in cost. But remember, all of this is to generate future cash flow. So those are horizontal mergers. And then they are subject to potential antitrust issues and approved by governmental regulator bodies. And in all cases, mergers need to be approved by the shareholder. Here is we have the Sprint T-Mobile merger, which I talked about. And sometimes they may be current competitors, but upon completion of the transaction, they won't be competitors. So let's take a look at these two videos and then come back and get into more detail.
After years of talking about it, T-Mobile and Sprint have agreed to merge. The two wireless carriers announced a $26 billion deal to become one company, and everything will be absorbed under the T-Mobile brand, with T-Mobile CEO John Legere and his team running the day-to-day operations. So prepare yourself to say bye-bye to Sprint. T-Mobile and Sprint are the third and fourth largest wireless service providers in the U.S., and the idea is that maybe if they join forces, they can better take on Verizon and AT&T. It is not official, though, until there is regulatory approval, but the companies are arguing to the government that a merger is good for creating jobs, largely because of the combined company investment of 5G. That's the next generation of wireless speeds. But some analysts are skeptical that it can create jobs because usually when there's a merger, that means people lose their jobs. Redundant positions get eliminated. But if you're a customer, nothing is going to change for a while. The deal may not close until next year. In the meantime, Sprint customers do get one little perk. Sprint customers can roam on the T-Mobile network if Sprint is not available, so you should get better coverage in more places. But if and when it does go through, these two companies run on different network technologies. The plan is to convert all of Sprint's CDMA network into T-Mobile's GSM network. Most of the world runs on GSM. Now, if you are a T-Mobile or Sprint customer, let us know how all this makes you feel. I'm Bridget Carey, and if you want a real deep dive into the questions of how these companies can pull it off, the consumer concerns, and the future of wireless prices, read our analysis at cnet.com.
Kellogg is exploring a sale of its cookies business, including Keebler, Famous Amos, Mother's, and Murray brands, and fruit snacks businesses to enable the company to bring a sharper focus to its core businesses. The CEO of Kellogg Company saying ultimately we believe these changes will make Kellogg more agile and better focused on growing demand for our foods. Shares of Kellogg are unchanged after hours, but it's worth noting the stock is in correction territory from mid-September highs, and it also follows another move by one of its competitors, Campbell's Soups, which is also looking to sell some of its snack businesses. So, Sarah, I guess consolidation is a big trend here.
With vertical mergers, there's advantages and disadvantages. The advantages enable a company to build barriers to new competition, keep other people out if you can control the supply chain. It facilitates investment in specialized assets, protects the product quality. If you can control the supplier you know that's going into your product, you can better control that. And it results in improved scheduling and process flow because you're focused on one objective, not necessarily two. Disadvantages, well, sometimes it actually increases cost of inputs. Suppliers have less incentive to be efficient, and sometimes it ties a company into old, obsolete, high-cost technology. When we look at it...
Acquisition of CNN's former parent company, Time Warner, is now complete after a federal judge approved the mega merger. The new name for the media company that owns CNN is Warner Media. And joining us now is John Stankey. He's the new CEO of Warner Media. He's our new boss, and this is his first television interview since the merger. Also joining us is Brian Stelter, CNN's senior media correspondent. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Can we get you any coffee? Your dry cleaning,
anything
perhaps?
we can do
And John and I are here to serve.
Let's not push it, okay?
So what a long, strange trip it has been for you to be sitting here today. Was it much more complicated than you ever thought when this was first proposed?
That may be an understatement. I think it was a trip like no other. And I'm really glad it's behind us, and we've closed it out. It's time to move forward, and really anxious to do that now.
So why was it worth it? You know, given how hard it was, what is it about us writ large that was so attractive to AT&T?
Well, first of all, it's an incredibly talented company across a lot of different media domains. And we felt it was really important that we have scale and capability to work on content from a variety of different segments. And so just like sitting here, news is very unique from what you might get in scripted long form, but both are very important in terms of how individuals want to consume content. For us over time, the days of being able to get people just to buy connectivity from you are coming to a close because connectivity is becoming very ubiquitous and very similar, and you're going to have to find ways to differentiate your business over time. And there's no better way to do it than with emotional content that customers attach to.
What are you focused on, Brian?
Well, you said to me the other day, CNN has a special social responsibility compared to, TNT or TBS or the Cartoon Network. And I think what I hear from staffers here, they wonder, well, what happens when CNN's Jim Acosta the other day is told by the campaign manager of the Trump campaign, you should have your credentials revoked. What happens in that environment when it's not Time Warner, it's Warner Media?
First of all, Jeff's got to continue to do what he does, which is run this organization.
Jeff Zucker, the CNN president.
Incredibly well, and that first and foremost will continue. And as you know, he's here with us for the ride going forward, and I'm really pleased and excited about that. He's a very talented individual, and that will obviously be our first driver. But, secondly, we, as I said to you last week, we clearly understand that there's a different obligation and responsibility in running a news organization like this, and we understand that it's a two-way street, that individuals like yourself work very hard to ensure that you're picking up factual and accurate information. And our job as owning this asset and managing it with you is to make sure we back you up in that regard when you're doing your jobs well. And we're committed to doing that.
It's a heck of a time to be jumping into the news business right now.
It's no different than the fact that this was a unique approval process, right?
Well, are they disconnected? I have to say. I mean, are they disconnected given the history here of what the president has said about the merger and about CNN in the past going forward? Obviously, we cover the Trump administration very closely, and it creates a lot of complications.
Look, I think everything in industry right now is probably more complex and more difficult than it's ever been. And I think if you were sitting over at Facebook today and asking about what it's like to run their business, the transparency dynamic that any company has to run under, and the volatility that it brings into decision making, that's just part of industry today. And I don't think it's unique to our circumstances. I think it's just broad scale across the economy right now.
So for all of our viewers who are watching, they want to know what this means for them. Are their costs going up? What else? How will this affect them?
Contrary to what the government alleged, no. Our goal here is actually to innovate on product. And, for me personally, why I'm excited to be here, I've always been happiest in my career when I get to build things and do unique things and do things that are different. And our goal here is to invest in this business, and our goal is to do it in a way that provides for platforms and capabilities that are consistent with where technology is taking things. And, a classic example might be here at CNN. How can we broaden the distribution of the great content you guys build every day? How can we make it more readily available in the pushed lifestyle that everybody leads? And I think there's some very exciting things to do in that regard. So it's about innovating. It's about building new product. It's about investing heavier in content. It's certainly not about going out and just trying to think about we want to raise prices on content for what other people buy.
I think that's interesting because there's been some concern in the cable industry that we're in a period of decline or shrinkage as opposed to growth and investment. And you're saying at places like HBO, there's more money that should be spent.
Well, look, I think that the model as we know it today, standard linear television is a very mature model. Standard linear television in the form of how ads are supported in it. But there's an opportunity to innovate in that regard, not only with how the content's configured, but to think about how advertising supports that content. And that's why we established the advertising entity with an AT&T that's being led by Brian Lesser. The purpose of that is to start building the new ad formats and the more targeted advertising that can lower ad loads and still monetize content in a way where it remains affordable for the customer. So that's the kind of innovation we're going to be working on.
So fewer ads, but more valuable ads. But when I hear you say that, I think, wait, what about Samantha Bee? Right, a few weeks ago, advertisers start calling up because she offended a lot of people with her comments about Ivanka Trump. What do you do when that happens?
Well, look, those moments are going to come up, and I wasn't here at the making at that point in time when that one occurred. I've had conversations with folks, and I have at least a high-level view of what took place. And I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you that every time something like that was coming up, there wasn't a conversation inside of AT&T. What would you do?
Yeah, what would you do? Yeah.
I would tell you that based on my understanding, again, I wasn't there with every detail of it, but process that I think was executed in that regard and the outcome from it tracked very similar with my point of view and probably what I personally would have done. At the end of the day, our job is to kind of make reasonable judgments, work through these things, get the facts. I think what is true is we're in a very transparent time. The speed at which you need to do that is changing pretty dramatically. It's going to have to be much faster than it has historically been. And that's going to be one of the challenges.
Look at Roseanne the other week, yeah.
A good example, right?
So HBO, obviously, as much as we like to think it's all about us, I mean, HBO is a giant part of this. And what you want to do with HBO is, I think, something that a lot of consumers, a lot of viewers would like to know. Brian mentioned maybe more of an investment there in content. Is the idea to make HBO more Netflixy, for lack of a better word?
So HBO is a fabulous brand, and they've carved out a great position in the marketplace. And we candidly believe, as we started this process, that with the right kind of investment, the right kind of technology platforms, that it can do more. It can garner more engagement from a customer. They do a great job with what they have today. And I think if you went and spoke with most of the folks at HBO, if they had an opportunity to invest in more content, they believe they can get more hours of the week of customer engagement. And that's really the battle we're all fighting, is how many hours a week are we getting engagement from customers? And we do believe that positioning the asset in a different fashion, that we can start to drive that engagement up. And it's going to be a combination of product and content that enables that to happen. And that's clearly a place we're going to be spending some time.
I think you should bring back The Sopranos and Sex and the City. Have you considered that?
My job is to stay out of the content decisions and facilitate capital allocation.
All
But
right,
I'll pass it on.
You don't want to be hanging out in the writer's room? You don't want to be pitching your own shows?
Well, I'm going to watch, but I'm certainly not going to get involved in the decision.
Ever take The Wire?
You like that?
The Wire.
All right, I'll talk to Richard Plepler about all of that. Brian, what do you have? What are you keeping your...
From a place, here's the wholesaler, importer, distributor, retailer, customer, is that it can be an integration. When we look at it within the oil business, you have exploration, which is looking for oil, production, which is once the well is dug, it's producing, then you've got to transport it from the wellhead to a production facility, which is refining, and then marketing and sales. Some companies are fully integrated this way, where there's different pieces who do each one of these. And there's value added along the way. Sometimes it's better to have better efficient use of capital to do it one way or another, but that becomes important. Oftentimes you have the integration based on mergers and acquisitions of different parts of the process. Then there is a conglomerate merger, and that just takes two businesses that are not related in any way, shape, or form, totally different industries, different areas, and you put them together. This was very common in the past, but it's becoming less and less common as companies are trying to become more focused. Advantages, you have diversification of business. Hopefully it doesn't all work the same way. Some of the correlations in the sales may not be the same. You can use excess cash between two entities. Improves the customer base. Better utilization of human resources, I think. And then sometimes economies of scale. Disadvantage, it's a shift in focus. It's very complicated. There's governance issues, who's in charge, and how do you take two separate products and put them together? Very, very hard. Not something that is done. So when we look at mergers, we have this relative size of the target and extensive integration. So when you look at it, you have, if there's a high size, big size, integration is very high, that's an in-market consolidation of equals. And if it is relatively small, it's a market absorption. Okay, so that's the merger of equals, and this is just you absorb and you expand your market that way. Out of market can be transformational to you, the company, and if it's rather small, it's a bolt-on. You're getting a specialized product or something. So that takes us to the end of video 1 on business combination. When we come back to the next one, that will discuss the financial implications. As always, if you have any questions, please let me. Oh my God, questions I did with, well, I have, 60 students plus 35 interns, so almost 100 people. And, you assign them projects and test, and then there was a little goober in the system somehow, which didn't allow someone to upload a file. So then they didn't know what to do with that. Yeah, so I figured it out eventually. But in the meantime, they had to send me an email with the Excel worksheet done. So, but it's just like one thing after another, and then sometimes, like now, I did a recording, and I can't get it to stop. Like, stop.